Welcome, everyone, and thank you. I'm clapping for all of you, and thank you so much for coming to this 8th Living Peace Speaker Series event. I'm Kelly Smith, and I'm here from the Center for Living Peace. We've been in partnership here with UC Irvine now for the last 4 years. We've been very blessed to bring you internationally known peacemakers who have come to speak about the work that they've done in the world and how we can all engage and make a difference in our own world. Tonight, we are so honored to have with us Nobel Peace Laureate, Madam Leymah Gbowee. As you can see from the film clip, that's from Pray the Devil Back to Hell. And for those of you who were here when we did Women, War, and Peace a few years ago, Abigail Disney did that documentary about Leymah, brought the attention of the work she did and to the world, and the Nobel Peace Prize honored her. So we're so lucky to have that full circle of Abigail and Women, War, and Peace, and now Leymah here with us tonight. Very, very grateful. You can see from the clip, Leymah used what she had. She used her gifts, which is part of what we say at the Center for Living Peace. Bring your gifts and share them with the world, and Leymah did that. She used her passion, her creativity, stood up with her courage, and brought peace to her country. Yeah. I'd like to thank, of course, UCI. We're so thankful to have the partnership with them. And also the Center for Citizen Peace Building, Paula Garb. I'd like to thank you for bringing Leymah here tonight and connecting all of us to the message that she brings. Also, the International Studies Peace Forum for always helping us with inspiring and insightful speakers, and the Students for Global Peace Building for going out on the ground and letting everyone know what's going on and how they can engage with this message. In addition, I hope that you all will stay with us later on tonight, or not tonight, later on tonight, but right after the conversation, because the Center for Citizen Peace Building will present Leymah Gbowee with their highest honor. So now it is my great pleasure to introduce to all of you a man who saw the vision of the center and how we partnered in our values with UCI. He is our local international peace warrior. He is a man of many talents and such a big heart. And I'm very honored to welcome Vice Chancellor Thomas Parham.
Let me say good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let me say good evening to the rest of you. Good evening. Let me first of all say thank you to Kelly. And I want to take a little bit of license and invite you just to stand up as humbly as you are. So please rise for me, Kelly, if you will. Because I want you to know that we simply would not be here tonight on this special occasion if it were not for her generosity and her vision. As you said, together, we make good happen. We've invited a jewel from Mother Africa into our space tonight. So it is appropriate to call on some of that African wisdom. Jeff, here we go. There's a saying that says it is the outer garment that best adorns the inner beauty of the person. So if you look at what a person wears, you can tell a little bit about the substance of their insides. This Center for Living Peace is the outer garment, that best adorns the inner beauty of Kelly Smith. One more time, right? Kelly Smith. Now, on behalf of our Chancellor, Howard Gilman, our brand new Chancellor, our interim Provost, Michael Clark, I welcome you to our campus, to the University of California, Irvine. This 2014, 15, and 16 years mark a special time in the history of our campus as we celebrate our 50th anniversary. 1964, the groundbreaking. 1965, the admission of the first class. 1966, the graduation of those first admitted in 65. 50 years of educational excellence. We invite you to join this celebration of what we call our bright past and brilliant future with special events like tonight's program. The Living Peace series dovetails perfectly with UC Irvine's commitment to educating and nurturing the whole person. We foster academic and research excellence in our classrooms and labs, but just as importantly, we foster character and leadership development and excellence through our co-curricular activities, both on campus as well as in the community. When we first talked with Kelly Thornton Smith about a possible partnership between UC Irvine and the Center for Living Peace, we were immediately struck. And we were struck by the total alignment between the values that we cherish at UCI and the values that guide the center and her vision for programmatic possibilities. Every now and then you just get that alignment where 1 and 1 equals 3, that synergy. That's what we have really with the Center for Living Peace in this series. And at the most fundamental level, at the core, we each create spaces. We create spaces intellectually, spiritually, physically, where individuals can connect to their inner selves. They connect to their fellow humans and to the broader world to make the world a better place. The brilliance of this Center for Living Peace is that it brings to life its mission of connecting people in authentic and deeply personal ways through speakers and projects. And we are honored to partner with them. Tonight's speaker, Leymah Gbowee, is here because of one of those projects. So let me set this up for you. 2004, there are a group of citizens who came together to honor the visit of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama to UC Irvine and established a scholarship in his name. So through our UC Irvine Dalai Lama scholarships, students develop and implement service projects that foster compassion, create collaboration, and create a better and deeper level of understanding in our community. That program has now expanded throughout the globe through Dalai Lama Fellows. 2 years ago, one of our Dalai Lama scholars did an interfaith project, and as a result, we were able to bring to our space renowned interfaith leader Ibu Patel. He came to our campus for this speaker series. And in that speaker series, for those who were there, anybody there that night, right, who saw Ibu Patel? You recall that he spoke about the critical need for people of all faiths and non-faith backgrounds to work together to solve our world's most intractable problems. Last year, our Dalai Lama scholars, Blanca Castro and Elizabeth Kopi, worked with a tremendously committed group of UCI students and faculty to launch Peace Week at UC Irvine, focused on teaching the skills of nonviolence and sharing panels and workshops on difficult dialogues. This was done through UCI's Center for Citizen Peace Building and the Centers for Global Peace Building. How wonderful it is to be able to align with this array of intellectual and personal resources, all trying to arrive at the same space to bring about peace in the world. They dreamed of bringing a world leader to our campus. They thought about that. What would happen if we could bring together a leader to our space who embodied a profound commitment to nonviolence and collaboration? An individual who united women of different faith traditions to defeat not just a village, not just a warlord, but an entire government. A person who embraces both compassion and action. Tonight, that dream comes true, ladies and gentlemen, with Nobel Prize winner Leymah Gbowee. In her Nobel Prize lecture in 2011, Madam Gbowee quoted one of my personal heroes, Dr. Martin Luther King. And she stated, and I quote, "We were aware that the end of the war will only come through nonviolence, as we had all seen that the use of violence was taking us and our beloved country deeper into the abyss of pain, death, and destruction. The situation in Liberia in those war years indeed reaffirmed the profound statement of Nobel Laureate, the late Dr. Martin Luther King, when Dr. King argued that violence never brings permanent peace. It solves no social problem. It merely creates new and more complicated ones." Ms. Gbowee is living proof that nonviolence can bring a country from the brink of war and chaos back to peace. It's okay to applaud for that, too. Our guest speaker tonight grew up in Liberia, and despite challenging circumstances, pursued her education and achieved her dream of attending college. But the ravages of civil war in Liberia took their toll, and she eventually found herself as a penniless single mother and a victim herself of domestic violence. But despite these obstacles, in 2003, she had the courage to help organize and lead the Liberian Mass Action for Peace, which was a coalition of Christian and Muslim women who sat in public protest confronting Liberia's ruthless president and rebel warlords. She used her education, she used her skills as a social worker, and both of these in combination, along with that indomitable spirit, galvanized women in Liberia to protest the murder and rape of girls and women. Under her leadership, ladies and gentlemen, these protests led to peace talks and the eventual overthrow and incarceration of President Charles Taylor. In 2011, she was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for her work. She actively advocates internationally for the rights of girls and women through the Bowie Peace Foundation. Finally, I would say about our guest that much of what goes misunderstood in African culture occurs because of our inability to understand symbolism and understand the idea that Africa fundamentally is a world of spirit and spirituality. So I want you to appreciate the spirit of the woman. As she's fond of quoting Dr. King also reminds us that one of the biggest changes that brought about revolutionary change in the civil rights struggles in our own America was about human determination on the part of Black people. Her spirit speaks to human determination. It was Marcus Garvey who reminded us, another one of our leaders, that chance never satisfies the hope of suffering people. And it's only through hard work, persistence, and self-reliance by which the oppressed ever realize the light of their own freedom. Hard work, persistence, and self-reliance is what drove this woman to say, I can and will make a difference with whatever gifts that I've been blessed with. Finally, we are reminded by the wisdom of the elders that say existence has a face on every side, and every face teaches a lesson. Those of us that truly understand existence never separate the faces from the lessons those faces teach. So as you have your brochures, if you have your bookmarks, who's picked them up, right? as you take a look at the face, if existence really has a face on every side and every face teaches a lesson, never separate that face from the lessons that she teaches the world and she will teach us tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, it is our pleasure to bring to you Nobel Laureate Leymah Gbowee.
Please have your seats. I could listen to the Vice Chancellor all night. And he was asking you to look at a face on the bookmark. That's a much younger face. The face you're looking at now has taken a lot of airplane miles. I've been on the road for 7 days now, from Boston to Mexico to here, and then I go to Atlanta tomorrow night, then to Minneapolis, then to Colorado, New Jersey, and then back to Africa. I have a 5-year-old. My husband is gone to East Africa to do some work, and she's staying at home with my 2 sons, 18 and 21. And so my friends, my cousins and sisters and everyone called and said, those boys are going to torture that little girl. And I said, I don't know about that. So first thing Sunday morning, I call and say, can you all put the video on so that I see my baby? And my son has a look like he's about to collapse. And I said, Art, what's going on? Mama, you need to come home. Your child woke me up midnight and said she wanted to have a conversation about something important. I sat down and listened to her. 6:30, she woke us up, me and my brother, and said, my parents feed me at 6:30 every morning. I decided to take her to church, and then he walks into the bathroom and showed me my child lying in a tub full of bubbles. He said, this is where she's been for 1 hour. Can you please tell her to get up? Because we need to go to church. And then I said, Moke, it's time to leave the water. And she said, but why? I'm not done yet. He said, we've been on this for 1 hour. And I said, okay, boys, I'll talk to you later. I have stuff to do. Mama, talk. And I said, no. This afternoon, I called, and he's like, hi. I said, Arthur, are you still alive? Yes, but I can't make it. The 5-year-old have a spirit. And what the boys don't understand is that it's her mother's spirit. So there is no torturing for her. She's promised to torture them and make sure they are in line. It's truly an honor to be here tonight. I would like to say thank you to VC Thomas for such a beautiful introduction, to Kelly Smith for your work. I would like to recognize my co-writer and friend, Carol Mitters. Miss Carol and I started writing my memoir when I was pregnant with the now 5-year-old. And over a period of time, instead of just being a co-writer, she became a confidant, a friend. And sometimes when I was pregnant, suffering from a severe case of sciatica, running to the drugstore to get me something to ease my pain. When the baby was growing and started learning to talk, the first name was Miss Cowell. That was how she called Carol, but we've managed to keep such a good friendship, and I'm happy for that, because most people work together and then they can't stand each other. But she's been very patient with me. She's the one that kept this relationship going. Trust me, had it been just me, we won't have a relationship. Kara, I'm happy you're here. I'm happy. She said she had a talk at UC Irvine with the young people. I said, did you tell them I was crazy? And she said, well, I just told them that sometimes it was difficult working with you. Say, you're so generous, Miss Carol. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here as part of the Living Peace series. And it's really humbling for me to stand here following the footsteps of great men and women who had come before me to do this series, especially the Dalai Lama and others who have come. I see this as a blessing from God. I'm humbled, I'm honored, and I thank you all, and I thank God for his continuous blessings. I would like to talk to you all a bit, and I know we'll have a time of question and answer, then the craziness will come out. On the theme, Living Peace, Leaving a Legacy of Peace. Living peace, leaving a legacy of peace. A few weeks ago, we, as Nobel Women, had a delegation to India. And the delegation was planned. We were going to India. It was going to be fantastic because it was in celebration of the Dalai Lama's 25th anniversary as a Nobel laureate. I was looking forward to it because I haven't met him. Victor Chang, who is one of his people, and I have planned visits, and that was when it was nailed. And then I got this email from South Sudan that they were bringing women from across the opposing lines to Addis Ababa for a meeting. And I spent 3 sleepless nights just tossing and turning and thinking about which invitation to accept. I called Sudan and said I couldn't make it because the Dalai Lama thing had been in my schedule for like a year. 2 days before, I called my assistant Hafiza and said, cancel India. I'm going to Addis. And she said, man, Madam Gbowee, I don't know why I took this job. I have to be the one taking the hate from these people. Man. I said, Hafiza, let me make your life easy. Tell them, I told you all, she's crazy. They will understand. Anyway, I canceled the trip and went to Addis Ababa. And I will never forget, and I don't regret. I regret not meeting the Dalai Lama, but I don't regret making the change. Because there was something about going to Addis, something about that trip that I needed. The UN had hired 2 consultants who had come to do all of the advocacy. So virtually my role there was to be an ornament, the Nobel Laureate, in a space with grassroots women. The beauty of my being there is that I'm a grassroots woman. So by the time I got there, the Nobel Laureate flew out the window. The grassroots woman became alive. And I told the consultants, pardon me, ladies, but can you allow me to just do the introduction part of the training? And they said, sure. Of course, they won't refuse me. So I get there, and I gave these women papers and asked them to write all of their names and titles, and this is something that I do when I'm training very powerful women. And everyone wrote their name and title, and I asked someone to be my sergeant at arms. And one of the women who is a member of parliament from South Sudan volunteered to be my sergeant at arms. And I have an empty suitcase. So each person is writing their titles, and some people need extra sheets because they've accomplished so much. Other people need a tiny sheet of paper because they haven't accomplished a lot. But we write all of the titles and names, and I ask them to fold them out nicely. And it's folded up. And I ask each one to walk and drop it in the suitcase. And each person walks and drops it in a suitcase and drops it. And then I asked my sergeant at arms to lock the suitcase and put the key in a safe space. So at that moment, in that room, there was no title. We were all equals. So we all now had to choose a name. I chose a very fancy name that I can't tell you all. But some of the women were calling themselves Princess of the Nile, the Rock of Gibraltar. I mean, just giving themselves back some of the powers that had been taken from them since December 15th. And then I told them, well, this is not it. After you've named yourself, we're doing a gallery walk. So we took New York Fashion Week to Addis Ababa. So everyone had to go up and down the catwalk and describe themselves. And I could see women standing and thinking about what they would say about themselves. Because in all of their lives, it had never been about them. It's always been about their community, their husbands, their children. So a lot of these women had never taken a step back to look and admire the beauty. Look and admire what they had. Look and describe the strength. And so when I said, you can't say anything about your husband, you can't say anything about your children, I'm only interested in you. So I showed them the way. Of course, I needed no confidence. I described myself like a supermodel and went up and down the room, and one after the other, those women came up and did what they had to do. It was at that point that I told myself, this is where I belong. This is what God wants me to do. Working with women, living peace with them, and leaving a legacy of peace. So the first day of training passed. The second day, we have our session of telling our stories. So we put a big bowl of water in the room. Each person is given a brand new candle. We have soap, towel, and I bring a very expensive bottle of perfume. And they are looking at me. And someone said, that's J'adore. That's my favorite. And I spray half of that bottle of perfume in that water. And we sit around and we tell our stories. And one after the other, women tell their stories of pains. There was this one girl who struck me. She was married off when she was 13 for 50 cows. She's not 25 yet, and she has 3 children. The man has lost interest in her. I'm African. I live on the continent. There was a moment of rage. I could not wrap my head around old people encouraging a 13 years old to be married to a 50-plus-year-old man for their own selfish reason. She looked so sad. And she said to me, I now just want an education for me and for my children. The burden is that it is just my mother and I. Those who receive the 50 cows are nowhere to be found. We live in a world today that is very turbulent. Violence and vices have taken over our world. Globally, we have over 64 countries that are at war with itself. We have 584 militias and guerrilla groups fighting in different parts of the world. There are 4 conflicts that is listed as the highest conflict: Mexico, Syria, South Sudan, and Iraq. And the reason why these 4 tops every other of the remaining 60 is because they have over 10,000 or more deaths annually. Gun violence is the order of the day. In many US cities today, parents sending their kids off to school have to worry if we will receive that call. I'm one of those because I have my kids at school. And as an African, I tell them, if you hear pop, start running. Don't wait. And they say, Mama, where do we run? I say, run in the direction of New York. Just start running. Won't you investigate? I say, child, if you stop to investigate, come home and tell me you stop, I will slap you. Just run. But that is the worst. We can count and recount and count and recount the number of stories. When the 20+ kids were killed, I remember crying my eyes out in Ghana, feeling the pain of the mothers in that tiny city. Economic injustices, human rights abuses have overtaken our world. I sometimes, as a Christian woman, believes that God looks down and is amazed at the degradation of his handiwork. In many communities where conflicts are ongoing, stories of pains, abuse, and tragedies is a commonplace. In South Sudan, Africa's newest republic, there are over 16 militia groups fighting for different reasons. Someone recently described the level of atrocities committed in the areas of those 16 different militia groups, including the government and the main opposition. He concluded that the level of violence we've seen done on the lives of people and on people disqualifies any of these so-called leaders from South Sudan to lead a pack of dogs. That's how bad it is. Men with guns say they are not rapists. We just put our stamp on a woman who may not necessarily want us. That's how they describe rape in some part of South Sudan. It is something that when you sit and talk to people who have been in these conflicts, you wonder where we're going. The world knows the Democratic Republic of Congo as the rape capital of the world. But this label of Congo obscures the sexual violence that is a common tragedy all over the world, including in this country. The Center for Disease Control reported 1 in 5 young women experience rape at some times in their lives. They talk about 1/5 of undergraduate women experiencing attempted or completed sexual assaults on their university campuses. This country is at peace, but women are subject to violence as they exercise their right to education like many other underdeveloped places in the world. In many places, gender-based violence extends beyond sexual assaults. For many countries across Africa, or least developed countries, the right to education is a war. Culture, tradition, political expediency, problematic, all kinds of things are used as a means of trampling the rights of girls and women who have the desire to acquire an education. There's a village in Liberia 2 years ago that we got 3 little girls from. The women of that village took those 3 girls and brought them to our offices. We've seen them. They are serious. We want you to educate them. One was 8, one was 10, and one was 12. In that village, the threshold for girls' education was 4th grade, and then they got pregnant. We took the 3 and put them on a boarding school. 2 have broken the records. One is now a 6th grader, another got double promotions, so she's an 8th grader and very good at basketball. And the other is now in the 3rd grade. In another community, this one young girl was the child of the village. Her mother died in childbirth. The women of the community took her and they've been educating her. But because she doesn't have a father, they were getting very worried that she was in the 10th grade and the men had started coming and making advances or pushing the women of the village to allow her to get married. What is she going to do with the education? She's just a nobody. 10th grade is enough. She needs to get married. They came to us and said, can you take her? I went back home this summer. I was there in July. And I went to an event, and this young lady walked up to me and said, Madam Gbowee, I'm grateful for your help. Of course, I don't know all of the girls because we have like 60 plus girls on the scholarship, and I'm never around to know everyone, only the problematic ones I know. Because they have to bring them for me to talk to them. She said, I just want to say thank you. I just made it to the 12th grade. But I want you to promise me something. I said, what is it, sweetie? That you'll be there for me on graduation day. That's all I want. And I said to her, I'll do my best. Then I called Hafiza. I have to be in Monrovia at so-and-so time when this school is graduating. She said, Madam Gbowee, I hope you realize that it is around the same time your son will be graduating from high school. I said, Hafiza, you have to make it happen. I met another young woman recently in Addis Ababa who told me she has stopped watching major news outlets. The nightmares that she has, the pessimistic views these news outlets project about our world. She says it's so difficult to be optimistic when you listen to such bad news. I was in New Orleans and a little boy said to me, Miss Leymah, I'm sick and tired of the TV because everything you hear is murder, 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 murder. I am sick and tired. And he's 6 years old. Whilst we see these vices unfolding, and I can go on giving you examples of negative things happening in the world and making you leave this room feeling very bad about the state of the world. Because in all honesty, some of the places you go to, you ask yourself, is there hope? When girls are being abused and women are being trampled on and gun violence is the order of the day and politicians are more thieves than anything else, corruption is everywhere. It smells from a distance when you walk into some countries. You ask yourself, is there any hope? Is there going to be any change in the state of affairs? Someone wrote an article about the leadership in Africa today and said they're a bunch of educated ragtag thieves. Years ago, and people tend to figure out, why is Mugabe still popular? Because when he came with his struggle, he had an agenda that Africans could identify with. A vast majority of our leaders globally today have no agenda that people can resonate with. They come, they want to be. When I was in high school, the Minister of Information came to our school, and those were the days we were in student politics and chanting, this government needs to be changed. And he said, you know what, it's so interesting that when these people come and try to coerce and entice you all to vote for them, they use the word masses, the suffering masses. And once they win their seats, they drop the M. You figure out who you are. But that is the order of the day. So you ask yourself, is there hope? Today, more than ever before, there is more peace organizations happening. There is more social justice organization. There is more social consciousness happening. So for me, that is the hope. As we see these vices unfolding, we also see a new wave, a new generation of young people like students on this campus who are saying no, refusing to allow themselves to submit to the shackles of negativity. They are standing up and speaking up loudly about the injustices of their times. The Arab Spring. Unfortunately, we saw them come out and then they stepped back, and the same corrupt politicians took over the space that they had created for democracy and justice. Community women who are the first victims of these vicious global conflicts are refusing to be statistics. They are changing the image of victimhood into victories. In February of this year, I found myself in DR Congo, leading a delegation of the Nobel Women's Initiative. So we went to the Oriental Province. From there, we went to Kivu. And when we got to the Oriental Province, first thing that shocked us, no one had did a security assessment and analysis of where we were going. So we arrived with our delegation in private planes. When we sat down to do our first security meeting, the first thing the UN told us, are you all aware that you are in an active war zone? Imagine the women from Silicon Valley who came with us. And then they were like, do we cut our trip short? And since I was the only Nobel laureate on that trip leading the delegation, the answer was hell no. We're here for 3 days, we'll do 3 days. But in 3 days, we heard stories. And usually when I go as an African woman into any place, I tell people 2 things happen. I come with my African worldview. So I'm in Africa, I understand the global view of women, the view of African women as victims, begging, bold, sagging breast, and very weak. And my mind is open because I know I have been perceived as that kind of woman before. So we get to this place and I'm sitting and listening to my sister tell a story. I have a red book and I'm writing and drawing curves and circles as I'm listening to the story, not saying a word. And we have all these international media following us. And one after the other, the only question they could ask these women, how many times were you raped? How many times were you raped? How many times? What objects did they use? Some of the most crazy things. And then afterwards, I asked them, did you all hear anything these women said? Yes, we've been raped. Yes, we've been abused. But no, we haven't succumbed to the pains that we felt. We haven't succumbed to the weakness that these men have that make them do the things that they do to us. So through every story that those women told, each and every one of them said, I was raped, I felt hopeless, then the women showed up. Then my sisters came. Then the mothers of the village came. Then the women of the church came. Then the women of this society came. They took me to the doctor. They counseled me. They gave me money. They gave me hope. Today, I have strength. Every foreign media person that was there, ear was to rape, and that was it. And I sat there, not looking at victims of rape, but looking at women who were changing the shackles of victimhood into victories. From one sister to the other, each and every one of them told stories of hope after. Every one of them came to the recognition and to the reality that we do what we have to do. I remember we got in the room and everyone was telling their stories and the tears were flowing. And I was moving around the room, touching people, hugging people, holding hands, talking to them. It was a difficult process. And then this girl would stand up and raise a song. And everyone would break into singing. And then after a while, one person would tell their story. As the tears would flow, she would stand up and raise a song. And the women who had babies in the room, she was going around picking the babies as their mother were crying and counseling and hugging those babies and comforting them. The next day, and for me as an activist, I see strength. So immediately I named her my pastor. So she was my pastor for the night that we're doing that session. The next day we go to Eve Ansler's city for women. And I see the same young lady there, moving around. So the one who runs the city, a sister from Congo, said to me, last night she was at your thing. I said, yes, that's my pastor. She said, Leymah, do you know her story? I said, no. So she has had 26 surgeries on her private parts. She will never bear children. And she's due for another surgery. She was raped and destroyed. That girl had so much zest for life. She had so much energy that even me, with all my strength, felt like a little child. And as we moved around that city, we got to the room where they had the drums. And then she challenged me to African dance. My shoes were off. My hair tie was off. I tied my waist. And because it's Congolese dance and it's East Africa and West Africans, a totally different thing. But you know what? Us West African girls are good dancers. And in 2 minutes of watching their moves, I was in the middle of it. And the women were just, but for me, it was the spirit. You may rape me, you may abuse me, you may take my children away from me, but you will never break my spirit. That was what I left Congo with. Breathing fresh air and changing the name from the rape capital of the world to the capital of sisterhood. That's how I call DR Congo, the capital of sisterhood. The capital of a nation that the resilience of the women is so strong that when Dr. Dennis Mukwege, who is the one doing all of their surgery, was attacked in his home, packed his things, left and went to Belgium and said he was never returning. The poor women went on their farms and they said, we know that rape will continue, but we need a doctor back here. They harvested their corn, their rice, their cassava, put the money together and bought an air ticket and told him, come back home, we will protect you. That is the spirit. And that is the spirit that keeps us hopeful. When you talk to the Congolese women and women of South Sudan and women of other places that I go to and ask them, why do you do this? They say when one sister is affected, all of us are affected. We have to prove to the world that we are the hope for societal transformation. In Afghanistan, you have an old lady, a good friend of mine, who's the sweetest thing in this world, called Sakina Yacobi, who has been doing girls' education forever. And I met her the last time. She's getting so old and frail. And I said, Sakina, you work too hard. And she said, I have to until I'm called. If I stop, who's going to send those girls to school? I can go on naming women on the continent who have done great things. I sat in that room with 2 young people who were serving me food, and I was telling the guy, we're just talking from one thing to the other, and I said, I don't know celebrities, but I know activists, and I'm starstruck when I see them. Whether it's India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, wherever they come from, those are the people that I rush to take pictures with. Unfortunately, I don't know stars from places in the Hollywood. My own country, Liberia, has a history of women rising to the occasion. Today in Liberia, we have one of the deadliest viral outbreaks. Again, the women. Again, the community members. They are proving that they can withstand and change situations regardless of the impact it has on their lives and livelihood. They're going from one place to the other, sensitizing communities about the impact of this disease on the lives of people. But they're also going to communities and giving little assistance where they're able to give. Most times, the question that I get the most, where do the people in these situations get the courage? How does one live peace in conflict? How does one live peace in the face of injustices? How does one live peace when peace is so evasive in the world that we find ourselves? We struggle with these questions daily, and the answer is simple. You live peace by not allowing evil to triumph over good. Yeah. And today we find it so difficult for people to rise up, for people to speak. We're just so comfortable in our corners. As long as it's not affecting me, I don't have to deal with it. Eleanor Roosevelt said, do one thing every day that scares you. I've turned that quote around and said, do one thing every day that everyone else is scared to do. Because it is in doing those things that everyone else, in an individualistic world that we live in, that everyone else is scared to do. That's how we create change. That's how we live peace, and that's how we leave a legacy of peace. I've told this story now like in a row, but I can't help. I previously mentioned that when I come to the States, I come with my African socialization mindset, mentality, and everything. So when I'm in New York and walking the streets, even if I'm wearing a jeans and baseball cap, because I realize that if I'm dressed like this with hair tie, someone will recognize me. But if I'm dressed like a true New Yorker, the chances of anyone recognizing me is very slim. So one of the days I'm going to a meeting downtown, and I see these 3 black boys. For some reason, something put my eyes on them. I see them going to a nail parlor. And as a mother, I stopped looking. And I don't know those boys. And they came out of the nail parlor with a flip-flop. And I was watching them. I stopped. These boys walked and turned the corner, and I walked. And there was an old white man bent over, struggling to walk. When I looked down, his flip-flops were broken. Those boys went and handed him the flip-flops. He looked at them, and they didn't want to take it, and they were like feeling bad. So I said, just lay it by him and walk away. But I couldn't help but to ask them, why? He needs help. And I said, whose idea was it? And they pointed. I said, come on, give me a hug. And I whispered to him, tell your mother she's raised a good man. The question I asked myself, how many of us passed and in the hustle and bustle of life did not even notice? How many white people, if we're doing by race now, passed by this man and did not notice? How many other blacks? How many just saw a poor, homeless, whatever, and just discounted his faith? But these 3 young men, they were the ones who decided to do that one thing that everyone else was scared to do. And I think it is in doing those things that we can change our world. Young people ask me all the time, Madam Bowie, how can I make a change? How do I know what I'm being called to do? The answer is simple. That thing that keeps you awake at night, the ones that will make you kick your husband because you're so upset and you're just kicking your feet under the bare sheet. If you have a husband or wife, you're kicking them. The thing that takes your adrenaline up, the things that pulls at your heart, the things that makes you mad, those injustices and different things you see that just make you mad. If it is constant, that's what you're being called to work on. Then the next issue is how. The answer is simple. That first idea that comes to mind when you think about dealing with that issue is the how. How do you know it's the right thing? You show it to someone, they look at you and say, girl, this is crazy. That's the right thing. Because you see, things that make sense or things that are easily accepted are not things that make impact. When Gandhi decided to leave his law practice to go and fight for the independence of India on foot, people thought he had lost his senses. Dr. King, a preacher, trying to work on civil rights and civil liberty in this country, when this had been the order of the day for generations before him, he was a mad black man. Yeah. When Rosa Parks refused to get up from that seat because she was so tired, I'm sure someone said, but what was she thinking? That first idea that is so crazy. 27 years Mandela spent in prison, and he was offered deals after deals. Just forget this anti-apartheid struggle and we'll set you up in places that you've never thought you would live. He refused, and people thought he was a madman. That one crazy idea, young people and not so young people, is the thing that you should work with. And then usually they ask the other question, so who are my allies? Anyone who look at that idea and say, great idea, hold on to them because they are as crazy as you are. But change in this world will not come until we dare to act. Living peace is not something that you do one time and leave it. Living peace is not a day's job. It is a calling. It keeps you awake, thinking about what next to do. I survive on 3 hours of sleep. 3. I go into my room at 9 and try to sleep, and then I remember I have something to write. Then I wake up. And then I try to doze off, then I'm up. So sometimes 12. And 3 a.m., I'm sitting up again, working. My husband and I dated for 7 years before we got married this year. And all of my African sisters in the feminist movement, they'll see him and say, so you're the brave boy. And they ask him, how is it? And I like his answer. He said, I'm adjusting. Because now when I sit up in the bed, instead of going at the desk to work with my laptop on my lap, he has learned to just turn his back, roll over, and go back to sleep. And sometime in the middle of all that, pop, 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 he asks me, you want a cup of tea or you want water? And he would get up, give it to me, turn his back, and go to sleep. And sometimes I just want to talk. And he would be going like this, and I say, I'm talking and you're sleeping. it keeps you up at night. It is not a career choice. It is a lifestyle. You refuse to align yourself with the status quo of injustice and violence. You purpose to see people for who they are and not the color of their skin, their political affiliation, their ethnicity, and definitely not their religion. Living peace is waking up every morning and daring to do something differently. So we have this foundation in Liberia, and they fired me, technically. They say I'm more chaos than good because I have ideas all the time, and they can't keep up with my speed. So can you please just retire after 2 years of starting this foundation? Just go. Go. All we need you to do is help us raise money. Afterwards, we need you for nothing else. Go. So when I finally decided I will go, I was sitting and writing and making plans about how I'm going to enjoy my newfound independence. And I'm writing, I'm going to take a quilting class. I'm going to probably learn how to swim because that's another story for another day. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do the other. And the day I have it all laid out, I'm talking to one of my staff members, and she said, really? I said, yes, I'm hands off. I'm no more looking for trouble. I'm just going to be me and live my life, take care of my husband and children. You people have driven me, do my speeches, do my committees, do my boards, and do all the 1,000,001 things I have to do, but I will add nothing new to my life. I am so devastated. That morning, the next morning, I woke up, opened my computer, and I read a story. The story was about 4 young children who had lost both parents to Ebola. 17, 14, 13, 11. And it's just a 17-year-old. Their father paid their rent for 6 months, and then he died. But the rent is up in December. And the story in that Yahoo article talks about the difficulty of them getting food. My new project. I pick up my phone that morning and call Hafiza. I say, Hafiza, go to Yahoo, read the story about those 4 children. We need to find them. Madam Bowie, are you mad? 3 million people, no contact. Where are we going to find those children? I say, Hafiza, I hate pessimism. We need to find those children. All right. And then I have a friend in Monrovia that I call my foot soldier. She would do anything for me. So I picked the phone and said, Grace, how are you? She said, I'm fine. Grace, I need you to find 4 children that live in this community. I just read about them on the internet. She said, Jesus is Lord. This woman has gone crazy. I said, Grace, I'm serious. We need to find this woman. So I sit in that chair at that moment. Then I remember I have a husband. I need to discuss it with him. And I say, do you mind if we just feed these 4 kids? He says, sure. And goes back to doing what he's very quiet. Poor man, I feel sorry for him. So after a while, I get an idea. The reporter had a Twitter feed at the end of the thing. I called Hafiza back and said, Hafiza, I got it. Write the reporter on Twitter and tell her the Nobel Laureate. I don't use that title all the time, but that day I needed it. Needed to have a conversation with her. So Hafiza sent that email, and in 1 hour, we have her on the telephone. We have a contact number for the young man who's in charge of these children. The next day, I have an SUV full of food sent to their home. Hafiza writes me the most amazing email. Say, Madam Bowie, I've seen you speak. I've seen you interact with presidents. I've seen you do many great things. But what I saw, a story, 1 hour later, a phone call, 24 hours later, food, and rent paid for another year, and a promise to educate these children till they finish high school. This is the boss lady that I will remember. So you don't want to hear the end of the story, as I have to go back to my husband a few days later and say, we just found another group, can we feed them? So yesterday we fed the other group, 16, 11, 8, and 4 months old. They've lost both parents. So Grace is asking me, are we sticking to these two? And I said, no, Grace. The more we find, the more we feed. Because living peace is not just speaking peace, it's doing peace. You seek to validate others. You seek to walk humbly. You seek to love mercy. And you seek to do justice. Living peace is not what is trending. It is forever. Living peace is your life. It embodies the principles of social justice, nonviolence, and seeing the good in everyone. I may be crazy, and I may upset people, but as I wake up every morning, I tell God, let me live peace. I don't want my legacy to be she was a Nobel laureate. I want my legacy to be she lived peace and she left a legacy of peace. Thank you.
Oh, give it up, Leymah Gbowee. Wow. Thank you, Madam Gbowee. Ladies and gentlemen, have a seat. She has agreed to take a few questions, so we now have time for just a few. So students from the Global Peace Building at UCI solicited questions at various events to present to Madam Gbowee this evening. So we will now have a few students ask their questions to Ms. Gbowee. And by the way, she has not been provided with the questions in advance, so you never know what spirit's about to come out, right? So students, if you would.
Hi. Hi, Ms. Gbowee. Nice to see you again. Thank you so much for joining us today. So my question kind of focuses more with, I guess, your husband and other significant others of the women in the movement. So for the women with significant others involved in the movement, how did their significant others support them? Were there others that were also against? And how did you and other women overcome that?
I must admit, first I'll start with the challenges. We had challenges with some husbands, and it was difficult for us. Most times people ask, working with the two religious groups, the Christians and the Muslims, who were the most problematic? The Christians were. They were bringing quotes from everywhere. They were the ones who had this self-righteous attitude, and most of their husbands were the problematic ones, especially some of the men who were in the churches as leaders of their different denominations. But there were also some men who were very supportive. There were two men who would come and park their cars. And these were not fancy cars. I mean, the ones that you have to push at some point. But every day as we ended our protest, we had to go to do evaluations, and sometimes we'll leave the room at 10 p.m. Those men would be sitting outside in the dark, and we were cramped in those two cars. They would drop us home. In some communities, the women were very, especially in the rural areas, they were able to overcome the obstacles of the difficulty with their husbands. So what they did was to use some religious tactics. In one community, they invited the men into the church and the mosques and told them that there are biblical references that when you're praying for peace, your husband have to, and the men were like, okay. So once they had made the vow in the church and in the mosques that they were going to journey with their wives, in the process, they had no other choice but most times to be at home helping with the children because there was war and the women were out there protesting for peace. But to say we didn't have problems, I'll be lying to you. Some women were thrown out of their homes and we had to look for alternative homes for them. Some were brutalized, but the one thing that I would like to say that most of those women who went through abuses never went back to their relationship. Because not only did we have a peace movement, we had a movement that provided a sense of empowerment for the women who were involved. Yeah.
My question was formulated with the current situation in regards to the 43 college students in Mexico who were abducted en route to a protest. So the question is, what can civil society in places such as Mexico, where corruption is so notorious, do to bring about government accountability?
Well, when it comes to politics and democracy and a lot of things, I think globally there's a feeling of apathy. We have many good people who sit and say, I can do that. I can do what that senator is doing. I can do it better. You have the skills to work with the people. You have everything it takes to be that politician that will meet the needs of your people or meet them halfway. The unfortunate thing is that a lot of the good people have stepped back, and people who are self-seeking globally are now stepping into the political arena and they're taking over. I'm about to go into a place that I'm not, okay, stop, don't say that. But in this country, you are seeing the rise of the Tea Party. People are seeing the Democrats and the Republicans that were the institutions of politics in this country lose ground to a group of conservatives. And you ask yourself, what is happening? So when people who understand different things refuse to take a step in the space, other people who wants to put their ideas forward. So in places like Mexico, I had the same question this weekend when I was there. Someone said, what can we do to end this? When you talk about the violence, the first thing you need to understand, when a house is on fire, when the firemen come, the thing that come out of the fire hose is not fire. There is nowhere in this world that you fight fire with fire. You have to use something cooler. And over time, what we've seen in Mexico, what we've seen in Chicago and other places, is that when violence increases, the response is increased violence. It never works. It's high time that we start looking for people who would begin to meet the needs of people. The question that I asked once at the UN at a meeting was, how come we've moved from taking out Saddam Hussein in Iraq and we now have an ISIS? Why is it that every time we try to do good, something else takes over? And I think because we're missing the mark, whether it's peace, whether it's politics, when the center core of all of these thematic concern, people. But what we've seen globally is taking people out of the equation and replacing it with interest, monetary gain, oil, militarism, and all of the different things that make a few people feel powerful. And until we can come back to the drawing board, where it is about our interaction with one another, we will continue to see the death of humanity at very terrible and horrible rates. We ended Libya. Today is bad. They ended the Egyptian president when? Today is horrible. So we're seeing that all of our attempts to recreate social order is turning out to be more chaotic than good. The question we need to ask ourselves, how do we recreate social order by bringing people to the table? When you go to peace talks today, it's not about the individuals that are being affected by the conflict. All of the conversation is about the oil, the government. South Sudan is a typical example. In September, the sticker issue at the peace talk was whoever becomes prime minister under the transitional government should not run for office. So you will be transitional prime minister for 2 years. And you will think because you say the government is not good, we're coming to do good, they could not proceed because the opposition who would get the prime minister position were saying they had to run for presidency. It's not about the people. So how do we bring it back to that order? How do we bring school back to focus on children and not the metal detectors and the guns and the securities in the school? How do we bring communities back to focus on engagement? How do we bring universities back to not just be fighting to graduate students who will become the next billionaires and have no clue on humanity and they're just interested in themselves? How do we bring it back to all of us in this room? Because until we bring it back to us, we will leave a very miserable world for our children to inherit.
One final question.
Hi. Yeah, so in Pray the Devil Back to Hell, you mentioned the difficulty that you had and your fellow woman had welcoming the boys and men who participated in the war into the community. So I was wondering, how does someone reconcile with people who have committed such heinous acts?
You know, I tell people God has a sense of humor. When I started working with those boys, they were the people I hated the most. I felt like they were responsible for all of the problems we had seen. They were the gun-toting militias, and they were the ones who killed, they maimed, and did everything. I went back to find a job to go to social work school. And the only job they could offer me was to be a case worker for ex-child soldiers. So I'm in a state of depression. I have 4 children. I'm a single mother. I'm dirt poor. And I know education is the only means for me to get out of my state. And I get that job, the most hated job in the world. So I go to it with hate and anger. And they see me and they hate me too. So we didn't start on a good foot. Few months later, I begin to see the macho boys for who they truly were. When they were high on crack, they were abusive, rude, putting out a sense of, masochistic attitude. When the drug had worn out, in that 16-year-old, I saw a 9-year-old arrested. In that 20-year-old, I saw a 10-year-old arrested. I could clearly see the moment they were trapped in their childhood, because what they were portraying were the ages that they were adopted, fed drugs, and given guns. I began to change my mind about them, that these young boys are victims of circumstances. Sometimes when we go through the worst in our lives, it is very easy for us to want to hate. It is very easy for us to not try to comprehend some of the things that happened. It is so easy for us to just want to break things apart and not find a space to try to make sense of what we're doing or what we're listening to or what we're seeing. And for me, I think God put me at that place because he knew that I would be on a journey where I would have to encounter different kinds of people. So by the time I begin to see those children as my children, we begin to have conversations, and the stories of hope and broken dreams and all of the different things One of the little boys, and I apologize that we've run out of time because all of my watches don't work. If I was in Mexico and it was on Mexican time, I just keep it on. Japan, I keep it on. China, we just keep rolling. So, sorry, VC. This boy was a child soldier, and he came from a fairly good background. He committed some of the worst atrocities in his community. And the community gave his parents an ultimatum: your son or us. And they chose the community. He lost a limb. When I started working with him, we were trying to reintegrate him back into the community. And I remember taking this boy. And for me, it just nailed it. That until we can get back to the place where we don't see monsters, we see children that were misguided, we'll continue to have this problem. We went to the community. His mother was surrounded by community women. And we went to her as the case worker. I said to her, "We've brought your son home." She looked at me and looked at him and said, "He's not my son." I did not give birth to a one-legged boy. I have no place for him. We took him back to town. Today, he lives in the street and begs for money at different supermarkets and chases my car whenever he sees me drive by. Somehow he met a girl on the street, had a son, and they brought this baby to me. And I had to go back to the village to ask his mother if she would take the child, because the girl was a drug addict, he's a drug addict. And this woman did the most amazing thing and said, "God has compensated me. I'll take this child on one condition. He's not his father. The mother is not the mother." So that baby has been with the mother. I think the child is about 15 or so now. And he has no interaction with that child. So a lot of the child soldiers have those stories. But many people in communities refuse to sit and listen to those stories. What happens with young soldiers and militias and criminals is that when they do those hateful acts, they are dehumanized. We don't see humans again in those people who kill and maim and do all kinds of things. We see animals. For reconciliation and re-entry to take place, we must go through a process of rehumanizing. And for me, I had to take that journey of rehumanizing each and every one of those young fighters. Building peace, living peace, leaving a legacy for peace, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, may be difficult. But all I think we should all strive to do, I believe, is to open our hearts, open our minds, and try to tear down the walls that we've built between one another. When you see me, don't see an African woman and act on your stereotype of what Africans or African women should be. See another human being. See someone that has been created to do good. When I see you, I shouldn't see a white person or a brown person or an Asian person. And as long as we begin to interact in this way and teach our children to interact in that way, one step at a time, one person after the other, we will be building peace, living peace, and leaving peaceful legacies. Thank you again. It's been an honor and pleasure.
Wow. Leymah Gbowee, give it up. I'm going to invite your patience with us just another minute. It is sometimes less important to be on time and more important to be in time, right? We are in time right here. And I'm now honored to welcome to the stage the co-directors of UCI Center for Citizen Peace Building, Dr. Paula Garb and Dr. David Snow. And they have a special presentation for Madam Bowen.
Wow. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Dr. Parham, for a wonderful event and partnership. Thank you, Kelly Smith, for founding the Center for Living Peace, for all of you who have partnered on this wonderful, wonderful program. My co-director and I, Professor David Snow, on behalf of the Center for Citizen Peace Building and Students for Global Peace Building, want to thank you for coming here and honoring us with your presence and sharing your story so generously in your legacy, in your lifestyle. You have inspired every single one of us to live a different life, to make a huge difference in the world. You have shown us that one person with courage, compassion, no fear, or maybe lots of fear and lots of determination, could turn around a civil war, could face men with weapons, men with power, by mobilizing women and men to stand up to that. How many of us can only dream of having that kind of courage? But you have given us the knowledge that it's possible for every one of us. I know that you had wonderful conversations with our students today, and many of us in this room been so inspired by you. We want to offer you our Citizen Peace Building Award. Before you, the Dalai Lama, President Gorbachev, Shirin Ebadi, former President Mary Robinson, former President Carter, many, many others. You best represent what one citizen can do to make a difference. Thank you so much for being here, for sharing your story, for inspiring us all. Thank you. Board members come up.
Every face teaches a lesson. We certainly learned some lessons tonight, yes? There are two we invite you to take with you on behalf of Kelly Smith and I. The first, what you just experienced is a healer. And you cannot be a healing presence in your community if you lose the belief that people can elevate themselves to rightful places of rulership and mastery over their own circumstance. Yes? She teaches us that. She also teaches us to really just appreciate and live legacy. Each generation has an opportunity to fulfill its legacy or betray it. Aren't we honored and delighted that we have just borne witness to just a strong African woman who refused to allow misery to have the last word? She has truly fulfilled her legacy. With that, we say good night. Again, thank you, Kelly Smith. Thank you, Leymah Gbowee. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Good night.